Hello, everybody, and welcome to the International Luxury Hotel Association webinar, where we are going to discuss how to massage your message and make the most out of your PR and communication activities. My name is Emily Newman. I am the co-founder of NewDog PR. We are a B2B PR agency with a focus on the hotel sector, specifically the investment arm of the sector. And I am joined by this charming lineup of professionals who I'm going to let introduce themselves because they know themselves far better than I. And we're going to go clockwise round my screen and start with Molly, if you please.
Of course. Hi. So my name is Molly, and I am the social media manager here at Red Carnation Hotels. So I have been with the company now for just under 2 years, essentially leading the social strategy, working very closely with our kind of whole central marketing team to develop that social strategy and ensure it aligns with our overarching marketing strategy. I look after the global social media teams. So we have 18 properties around the world. And I'll touch on this in more detail in a bit, but those hotels are all very different. So it's essentially working out how we can kind of get the message out there in the unique and wonderful ways of the different properties. So yeah.
Marvellous. Thanks, Molly. And Roman.
Hi there, I'm Roman Townsend. I'm the Managing Director at Belvera Partners. We are a PR consultancy that focuses just on the travel technology space. And within that, we work with lots of hospitality technology companies, including Shiji, who provide tech that about half the world's hotels use in some way or other on the property. BeyondX is a revenue manager, and lots of people in the hotel accommodation distribution space, including Dida Travel, which is a big Chinese bed bank. It's a pleasure to be here and looking forward to the discussion today.
Thanks, Roman. And last but not least, Mika.
Hello, my name is Mika Bishop. I work for PR and Comms Consultancy Houston. Experience gained largely 15 years of experience gained in the hospitality sector, working with international hotel groups, independent hotels, tour operators, and private jet business.
Very excited about the private jet business, but we'll come on to that. We'll come on to that later. I think it might be helpful just to frame the conversation by perhaps talking about how PR and communications shifted during the pandemic. We're going to explore what happened, how things had to realign, and possibly then go on to talk about whether any of those shifts were sustained or whether anything has gone back. So can I start, sorry to jump, I'm going to just go straight for Mika and ask you what noticeable trends you saw during the pandemic and anything that reverted straight back or changed after the pandemic.
I think during the pandemic, it was a time of global crisis, and internal comms really was a huge priority. Internal comms with staff to keep them engaged and informed and positive. There was a real shift in focus to the well-being of staff as well, and it was a time for business leaders to communicate with clarity as much as they could and to interact with staff. Externally, from a media perspective, obviously no one was traveling really. So travel media, travel articles were really sparse. So it was really important for PRs and hotels to come up with creative angles to keep their message out there, such as chefs offering home baking tips, sports club instructors offering exercises online, that sort of thing. And customer comms as well played a huge part during the pandemic to maintain that loyalty and to keep them engaged. I think all of the above are still very important post-pandemic, but I think post-pandemic there is a greater focus now on communicating the purpose of your business, the brand values, and what your business stands for.
Lovely. Yes, we saw a lot, didn't we? Particularly sort of the major retailers and supermarkets leaped to mind with letters from emails from the CEO directly to consumers, and the same with the hotel groups are reaching out directly to consumers. And so that line of communication shifted, which I think was pleasant in an overall way, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah, no, definitely. I think it instilled trust and loyalty, and I think the meaning of loyalty, it took on a different meaning. You have loyalty cards for lots of hotel groups and hospitality businesses and stuff, but actually people were questioning what exactly does that loyalty mean. And I think that customer communications had to be more meaningful to maintain that loyalty.
Absolutely. Molly, what about you? And in terms of the hotel, what did you have to do during the pandemic, and are any of those activities sort of sustained?
Sure. So I actually joined Red Carnation just after the pandemic. So I kind of missed all of that, but I jumped straight into that kind of like reactive sort of post-COVID messaging. And I think, you know, looking at our audience's sort of behavior, and I mean everyone's behavior after the pandemic and how that's changed, and how do we sort of tap into that audience. You know, obviously everything's a little bit more, you know, the want to travel is so much stronger, but then, you know, the reality of it actually is a bit more sort of expensive now. You know, flights are more expensive, room rates are more expensive, and it's just like, how do we sort of connect those two and sort of portray that messaging, especially through social as well, in terms of like, who are we actually talking to? You know, it's the younger generation, I suppose, but then also tapping into our more loyal customers who potentially, you know, have not really used social much, but then during the pandemic they can't see their families as much, so then have joined, you know, Instagram or have joined Facebook. And how do we kind of explore that new audience? So I guess in terms of like being reactive to that, we sort of had to sort of you know, shift who we were talking to, because we saw an increase of, you know, people that weren't usually on social prior, and obviously, you know, just becoming a bit more digital. I think everyone got used to that, you know, when they couldn't go out to the shops, you know, to get a magazine or etc. You know, so how do we kind of shift that into kind of a new audience that we weren't really used to? But it's been really interesting. And I think actually, like, jumping off the back of the pandemic, we've now learned to be a bit more sort of proactive now. And I think that's was a bit of a relief, just in terms of like planning, because obviously, you know, reacting quickly, crisis management is a great learning curve, but now actually being able to sort of become a little bit more proactive and plan has definitely been really useful in terms of like planning, especially planning our 2023 strategies. So yeah.
And I guess your point about sort of tracking the behaviour and the channels that people are using is a really interesting one. Do you use analytical tools to do that and to gain the insights into understanding who's using what, and then craft activities based on those analytics?
Yeah, absolutely. So in fact, like a huge part of our 2023 social strategy is video first. So this basically, I think everyone knows the rise of TikTok over the pandemic. I definitely thought I was too old for it. And then I sat there and I was like, oh my God, I'm obsessed. Like now, you know, I don't go without a day without going on it, which is probably shouldn't admit that, but it's true. I think so with even just simple things like tracking, you know, obviously what kind of posts people are engaging with. I mean, we run like monthly reports across all our 18 hotels. And it's really interesting actually to see how people are reacting to different types of content within different parts of the world. So yeah, I guess it's just, you know, we do run those reports. Like I said, video first content is something that we're focusing on a lot. But I guess, you know, we can be very adaptable to what's changing. And I guess that's a massive part of social as well, as, you know, jumping quickly onto trends, or, you know, seeing one company, you know, I look at my competitors and I think I never, you know, how can we, it's never sort of, I don't know how to explain this very well, but it's never sort of like, oh, they're doing that really well, and I'm like, you know, feel negative about it. It's like, okay, well, how can we all jump on that? You know, at the end of the day, we're all kind of selling the same product. You know, it's a hotel room, it's a stay, you know, exactly. So how can we kind of adapt to those different trends? And yeah, just seeing what our audience, it changes every month, which is really exciting, but it is also challenging, you know, 18 different properties around the world, all reacting to different things. But, you know, how can we sort of jump on that and make it really exciting? So yeah, it's a great challenge.
I think your point about being proactive and the lessons, you know, that we've all learned about that is a very, very positive, a very valuable one, and something that we've all learned, and that's for the good. Thank you very much. Roman, your current business was born during the pandemic, I believe. What kind of activities did you see during the pandemic? Has anything, I know you've been in the sector for a very long time, but what did you see during the pandemic, and what's sort of stayed or shifted back?
Yeah, well, it's been an interesting few years for me. So at the time when things kicked off, I was the Director of Communications at Hotel Beds, which is a very large B2B bed bank, I suppose would be the best way to describe it. And that initial sort of first 6 months or so, we were incredibly busy doing the kind of PR that we'd never really done before, which was very focused around operations. In fact, at one point, I led an IT development project to create a website that would allow people to confirm bookings and refunds and things that before we didn't have, because it wasn't needed, because there had never been, for every 10 bookings, there's one cancellation. Suddenly it became, for an intense period, for every 10 bookings, there were 30 cancellations or something like that. Bear in mind that you've got bookings going back months, and so you can have more than 100% cancellation rates. And so we were very focused around that. Internal comms, customer comms, financial communications as well, because there was a recapitalization of the business. So we're incredibly intense period of time, and then things just sort of dropped off, because what happened was for the whole of the industry, the B2B side of the industry, the travel tech side of the industry, suddenly they became the least priority. There are lots of businesses, hotels, airlines and so on, who were thinking about the survival, and so they weren't thinking about what kind of technology we're going to implement and how we're going to improve, because they had no bookings. And so the sort of the travel tech side of the industry suddenly faced itself with this huge challenge, which I don't think the hotels and the airlines did, because they had this, B2C businesses have this sense that we've got to keep the presence, we've got to keep the visibility, we've got to keep engaging the customers. Whereas B2B companies tend not to have that same kind of view and place the same kind of importance on their marketing and communications. They see it more as about being the tech, and PR comes sort of second. So that was the experience I had. That meant that I then lost my job, which was fun. But out of that, that's why I started this business, and I've been playing with it quite a while. So actually, it was the perfect kind of kick up the bum to get me going. By the time I'd left and started the business, we'd sort of turned the corner. It was early 2021. But obviously, it was tough times, and we saw people with different kinds of communication needs. The clients that we're taking on, mostly people who were quite brave travel technology companies who had a longer term vision and who wanted to bring in either technology that would respond directly to COVID and the challenges that we're facing, or who felt that they were going to disrupt the sector when things came back. Since then we've been growing ever since. In terms of kind of communication channels and needs and techniques and so on, I don't see so much of a shift really. The sort of audiences that we're dealing with don't use Instagram, TikTok. They've probably never even been on it. LinkedIn is the main platform. I think that's evolved. It's of greater importance now than it was 3 years ago, but it was still pretty important 3 years ago. Travel trade media, and I think the same kind of techniques, great content, getting people out there talking about subject matters that really engage people, not talking about your product. I appreciate that in the hotel space and the aviation space and so on, it's different because people want to see the product. What does the room look like? Where is it? What are the cocktails like, and all the rest of it? But in our space, no journalist wants to hear that, and that hasn't changed, and I don't see that ever changing. And if it does, I'll be out of a job.
Well, let's hope that doesn't happen then. You raise a valid point about the recapitalisation that a lot of businesses went through during the pandemic for obvious reasons. And I was listening to a webinar by EY yesterday, delivered by EY yesterday morning, and their chief economist said that a recession was baked in for 2023, albeit probably not as a harsher one. I do apologise, the dog is now playing with a squeaky toy. Not as harsh as first predicted. But with that in mind, I'm curious to know your thoughts on what happens when businesses look at the P&L and see the PR and comms line and think budgets are squeezed. Do we need to reduce that? We all believe full-heartedly in the value of PR and comms, but there'll be people listening, members of the association, who need to justify the return on investment for PR and communications. And I think it might be quite interesting just to have a quick run through why it is so valuable and why it's critical to maintain an active PR and communication activity. Molly, what do you think?
Good question. Yes, so this is something that has been super insightful, I think, since I started this position, and also I think post-pandemic, obviously, in terms of budgets. So I guess for me, it's really trying to sort of prove that social spend in terms of money for photo shoots, money to put behind influencer stays and things like that, how are the more sort of, so especially with influencer stays, it's a little bit more difficult to track the kind of ROI, because essentially, unless you give an influencer an affiliate link or something that is like directly trackable in terms of like through booking engines, etc., you can't actually see how much money you're bringing in from one person coming in and having a dinner at one of our F&B outlets or having an overnight stay, etc. So I guess in terms of this, it's just executing it really, and hoping that my GMs trust me. And I think the kind of touching on the, and honing in on the kind of more awareness strategy of it has been super beneficial. And actually this has been great in terms of how we collect our content as well. Recently, we work with a lot of influencers. We're lucky enough to sort of have built these relationships with these amazing talent across the travel industry, and how we can kind of collect that, how we can work together with them and collect that content, which essentially, does save us a little bit of money on bigger photo shoots, but it also helps us to kind of touch in with influencers, wider audiences as well. So the engagement on that has been great. But yeah, in terms of like, budgets and sort of justifying that spend, I think it's more just like we have seen a massive increase in engagement over the last year, from working with influencers, from, producing better quality photo shoots. Paid social is kind of different, but I'd say, we had to, again, going back to my first point, we had to sort of really like look in on our new audiences and focus in, those smaller campaigns, I guess, but doing them more regularly, in terms of like, and fine-tuning those audiences sort of post-pandemic. So I guess for me, it's been kind of like definitely a work in progress in terms of sort of like justifying improving those costs over the last year, but we have seen the results, which has been great. And I definitely know that our properties are super keen to sort of carry on in terms of like the influencer activations, and just kind of carry on with all that activity, which doesn't necessarily bring in that line of as in obvious line, their ROI necessarily super obvious, but in terms of like an engagement and awareness practice, it's working out really well. So yeah.
Good point, thank you. And Mika and Roman, you obviously work with multiple clients, and presumably you have to, on multiple occasions, have to justify spend on PR and marketing. Mika, what's your response when a client comes to you and says, "Eek, don't know how I feel about this"?
Well, it's consistency of communication. I think in the long run, it isn't cost effective to switch comms on and off. The consistency of communicating and interacting with the media and all stakeholders. Again, we go back to this point about trust and loyalty. If you remain engaged with your audiences, then they're more likely to stick with you. And if you switch that comms off, there's a risk that clients and customers will go elsewhere. So. And it's fair to say that particularly during the pandemic, many businesses that maintained that consistency of communication and engagement are the ones that have emerged from the pandemic with their reputation intact. And so whilst the cost of living crisis, yes, it's having a huge knock-on effect on some businesses, but it's a time to look internally at your messaging, to engage with your staff, and then come out stronger on the other side.
I think, and this is a theme that will be repeated, I'm sure, during our conversation, but the entire PR and comms remit is all about relationships, whether that be with influencers, with press, internally, and that those nurturing those relationships and having honest conversations. If budgets are squeezed, we know operators are under huge pressure. So it's a case of going to our agency and saying, look, we're really struggling at the moment. Is there anything we can do for 1 month, 2 months? But just keep something ticking over rather than binning it completely.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think during times of crisis and when budgets are squeezed, there's a need to be empathetic to your clients and also the clients and the client supply chains, and that sort of empathy and tuning in and working collaboratively with your partners and your whole supply chain and your consumers to to build that collaborative approach.
I couldn't agree more. Raymond, what's your thoughts on ROI for PR and comms spend?
Well, yeah, it's sort of it's an eternal question, isn't it? I definitely would agree with what you're saying, Mika. The turning the tap on and off thing doesn't work. I think one of the challenges we face is that it's impossible to directly link it to any kind of ROI, and that the benefits that we have it's farming, not hunting. The benefits are so far away. And such that the link is so sort of weak that people often can't see that. And you can cut your PR today and you can go all right for 6 months or a year or 2 years. And it's only when you have a problem that you go, oh, what happened? And then no one says, oh, it's because 2 years ago we cut the PR. They'll say it's because, well, someone went on the TV and said something, nasty or the public doesn't like that we've done this or that. So it's quite hard. When clients ask about that for us, we're just simply very clear, these are the things we're going to deliver for you. So, if you want to be in these media publications, you want to speak at these events, and so on, if you want to begin shifting the narrative, these are the actions that we will take. We can say with almost, 100% certainty, these are the kind of outcomes you'd like to have because, we know what we're doing. If that looks good, if that's what you want, then this is what it costs and this is what we're doing. If you don't want that, that's fine. Or if you don't have the budget, that's fine. But we can't link that to sales or anything else. And we're quite firm about that. And we take people back and say, why is it you want those things, and what is it you think you're going to be getting out of them? 6 months from now, a year from now, you can say, yeah, you delivered on that, but it didn't work out for us. We don't think it increased our sales, or people still haven't changed their perception of us. But we're really quite firm on that when we start getting into people wanting to see some sort of direct link. I just say that there isn't one. It doesn't exist, and I'm not going to. We can't promise that. I think my experience generally is that if people bought into what we're delivering, then they get that. Particularly the conference speaking and stuff, when they step down on stage and someone walks up and says, we'd like to talk with you and do business, I think people really, really see that benefits. We're very insistent that our clients have got to get out there and do these things, be in the room, participate in panels, join lobby groups and be on their committees and that kind of stuff. And then the sort of, the penny drops. But otherwise, you just can't convince people. I mean, I think everybody knows that stories at the heart of what we do. You think more people are religious around the world than not, and some people go out and kill people, on the basis of what their religious beliefs are. It's just storytelling, really, fundamentally, with all respect to everyone who might have faith. These are just stories. It's narrative, and if you can get that right, you can motivate people way beyond economics. And either you've got to believe in the power of that, or you don't. I don't think there's any graphic or chart that you can show people that really convinces people with leap of faith.
Good point. Your point, and it resonates with Mika's response to the first question around purpose, I think is essential. And for us as PRs, and Molly, you will do the same, I'm sure, with your inverted commas internal clients as the hotels, that whatever that purpose is, that key messaging has to have absolute clarity from the client's point of view. And we can help take that message and form it into stories that are engaging and relevant to our media partners and relationships. But I think the organisation has to have complete clarity on what it is they want, what the messages are, and therefore what it is they want to achieve from the PR and comms activities. I'm going to hurtle on because
and so just a very quick point. I think that's often where things fall down. I think people are like, oh, we just need PR, we just need, and often we challenge people to say, but who is the audience? What are the personas? Who are you actually trying to influence? What do they read? What events they go to, and things like that. And I always find it surprising how many people say, well, we don't really know. And then we say, well, I don't think this is going to work because you don't seem to have any clear objective.
Yeah, and sometimes you do have to have those slightly fierce conversations, don't you, with people? And if it's not, and that's actually quite a brave and sensible move, because if that's not clearly defined within the organisation, then the PR is going to fail, the relationship will probably break down, and no one's going to end up happy. And perhaps it's just something that the client needs to go away and have a little think about for a bit, or we could work with them, collaboratively to try and define those messages. But unless that's solid from the outset, the rest of the journey isn't going to be too smooth. I want to just, a couple of other things I'd like to cover. Molly, I'm going to come to you initially and ask you about the decision to create individual channels for the 18 hotels, because I think that's very interesting, and there'll be a lot of members of the association listening that have multiple properties within their portfolio, and the decision about that. And then Mika, I'd like to come to you and talk to you about the priorities for PR and comms in the luxury space. And then Roman, we're going to have a little chat about the B2B distribution element of it, and then we'll sort of round it off. So that's sort of the overview for the last 10 minutes. So Molly, why 18 channels when one would do?
Yes, so this is my greatest and most exciting challenge, I'd say, of my role. So, when I first joined as well, I was a bit like, why are we doing this? But actually, I see, the 18 different properties are individual personalities in themselves. They all have completely different USPs. They are based in different parts of the world. Yes, we have, six properties in London. Just because they're in London doesn't necessarily mean that they're all targeting the same people. So I'd say kind of the main reason for that is that they all have completely different things to say. And that makes it so exciting, from a content perspective, from an audience perspective, from a, influencer perspective. What we're pushing out there, we have so much scope to push, the most amazing and unique content, really. I'd say, like, sort of the challenge with that is that they are all under, the Red Carnation Hotel Collection, which is how can we kind of, we have our sort of overall overarching brand messaging and the tone of voice, and it's like, so how can we push that out there, with these different 18 properties, but in their kind of unique way and through what they can offer. So essentially it is kind of as simple as that, really. They're all very different, they're based in different parts of the world, we're targeting different people. Even things like time zones, it's like, how can we, that's a big thing for us as well in terms of targeting different people. Some people will be asleep when other people are awake. And yeah, just the kind of the different communities, I guess, and tapping into those different audiences, and the variety of content, but then still trying to keep it all kind of under one umbrella, which I think we've done really well, and sort of continue to do that. So I guess it's a simple reason, but I guess that is why.
No, that's perfect. And I'm curious, do you have for the different properties, do you use different channels? Do different channels, social channels, work better for some? Have you done the analysis around that and sort of forward, some there's better engagement on Instagram, some on Facebook, etc.?
Yeah, so I'd say kind of primarily with our social strategy, we just focus on Instagram is our sort of primary channel, and then we do have Facebook accounts and Twitter accounts as well. I'd say from a kind of more, because we're focusing sort of main efforts on Instagram, that is, that is what is usually responding well. With the individual properties, there's no sort of major difference there. In terms of TikTok, this has also sort of been a very interesting conversation, is, when we look at this kind of next generation of Red Carnation, we have our amazing existing loyal customers, that return, and that is sort of a different age demographic, I guess, to the people that we're targeting as this kind of next generation of Red Carnation. But we're quite lucky in the sense that, it's like with those returning customers, I will get back to TikTok in a minute, I promise it all leads onto it, but it's like with those existing customers, it's like, okay, how can we target their nieces, nephews, children, grandchildren, and I think this was a big one that sort of came out recently, is TikTok. But actually, how can we push our messaging and push our product on TikTok when essentially the people that are watching TikTok right now probably won't spend X amount on a hotel room, but it's like, how can we push that awareness maybe from like a recruitment perspective, or channeling the different sort of outlets that we have in terms of for example, the Rubens at the Palace in London, Victoria has, a fantastic afternoon tea offering. It has, fantastic, well, I mean, all our properties do. But, it has different sort of elements that we can kind of take that content and push in different ways across different channels, if that makes sense. But, I think, yeah, for us, it's definitely focusing on Instagram, definitely focusing on Facebook. And then in terms of sort of like paid social, it's the same kind of 2 channels as well.
That's fascinating. Thank you. Really insightful. Mika, let's talk about luxury, and specifically, let's just all imagine we're on a private jet for a minute, shall we? Take a moment to enjoy that. But tell us about how PR and comms messaging needs to be tailored. Are there any unique parts that need to resonate with a luxury audience?
I think the importance of narrative, that really can't be underestimated. Knowing who your audiences are and communicating the benefits of your brand to the consumer. What are they going to take away from experiencing a stay in your luxury hotel? And it's getting the consumers to buy into the purpose and the reasons, the reasons why you exist and what you're doing and what your purpose is. Engaging with staff as well to create a stronger voice for your brand as well internally, so that communicates externally. And also making more personalities behind your brand in the hotel to give that personal approach, allow the customers and your stakeholders to get to know who is the faces behind your brand. Content, as has been mentioned, that is key. Content, not just content about your hotel, but video content about the destination that your hotel is in, the experiences that customers can take away and create memories from. Video content is very compelling and very engaging as well, but also brand partnerships. They're a great way for luxury hotels to reach a new audience, a brand partnership with a lifestyle brand. So elevating your hotel to become not just a player in the travel sector, but a real lifestyle brand.
Yeah, all very good points. Brilliant. Thank you. And hopefully lots of creative ideas for our audience as well. Thank you very much. Roman, can we have a quick chat about the distribution side, the B2B distribution side, and also, if we've got time, just a little bit around PR for events, because I know that's a space that you work a lot in. Over to you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then, yeah. So, for us, I think, as I was saying earlier, the channels haven't really evolved that much. LinkedIn's very important, as are the travel trade media and conference speaking and so on. B2B communication often is, in the hotel distribution, hotel accommodation side of things, is very different. I've been doing this for a long time. I don't think I've ever once done any press release about anything luxury related or the room types or whatever. I mean, it comes in at a factual level. These hotels have these rooms, the pricing and all the rest of it. But the kind of the emotional side of it doesn't come into it. It's all about the technology, the pricing, the conditions, the operations and customer service support, where people have got the reach, in particular topics like I think bed banks have often got a bit of a bad reputation because some people at some hotels see them as offering guests that they could have got anyway, that they would like to disintermediate. They would prefer to have the direct bookings. And so trying to position those bed banks and B2B sellers as providing people with incremental bookings, higher value bookings. So particularly, you think for hotels like yours, Molly, trying to attract Chinese travelers. Have you got Chinese speakers? Can you run WeChat? You haven't mentioned WeChat, so far in your conversation there, or Weibo or any of those platforms. Their payments, all the rest of it. So trying to reach those kind of audiences is often a big message. That the bed banks can bring you people who wouldn't have come before. They'll stay longer. They'll pay more in advance. Tipping, certain guests tip more. And the teams like that stuff. So there are all those kind of topics that you need to get into. In that respect, I really love it because I think it's really interesting. It's a lot easier to differentiate yourself. I think I would imagine that for luxury hotels, it's quite hard to differentiate yourself. I mean, you've got a fantastic backdrop behind you there, Molly. I believe it's one of your properties, and I'd love to come and stay there. But there are, with respect, lots of other, amazing properties in London and some of those big cities around the world. And so for me, that challenge is different. I think also then there's a whole world on the conferences and speaking side of things that is very important. Certain trade shows, events, webinars, networking groups, and so on. I think probably what a lot of people don't realise is this whole world of hotel distribution revolves around Mallorca, where I'm based. One way or another, everything leads back to Mallorca, which is for historic reasons. And for example, there's going to be an event coming up here in May called Travelgate X. Travelgate is a marketplace for B2B sale of hotel accommodation, and their event that they do has everyone, absolutely everyone on the planet in the hotel accommodation distribution space. All the switches, the channel managers, the bed banks, people who provide tech, to that environment. And there's a lot of people coming from other places, but a lot of them are based here. Hotel Beds, where I used to work, based here. 1,500 staff, biggest employer on the island, or biggest employer under a single site, I think. So yeah, I think it's very different kind of communication environment. We do a lot of features. We're jumping a lot of trends. We're looking at things right now like ChatGPT. Endless amount of clients commenting on that. How's that going to affect the industry? Metaverse, blockchain, crypto payments, but all these things looked at from the purely tech perspective. Your second question you had was about events. Yes, we do the PR for quite a lot of industry events. Focusrite is one of our clients. We're about to kick off the PR for their event that will be happening in Barcelona this year. And we also are working with Arrival, which is an in-destination event that takes place in Berlin, just before IT Berlin. So we're gearing up for that the week after next. And again, that's a different sort of type of PR, because very much around the topics that are going on. Some of the sometimes the corporate issues that are happening and so on. But to do those, we we sort of stick a flag in the sand, say this event's happening, this date, and all the rest of it, and that gets coverage. But after that, if you send out any press releases like that, they're just binned. We then have to work with those organisations to find out what the speaker's going to be talking about, and what kind of data have they got, and really kind of drip feed those kind of stories out again and again and again, and work very closely with the speakers and the sponsors to find out what it is that they've got. So the Arrival event that will be starting Sunday week, I think they've got 50 speakers, and I think we've set up for 15 of those or so already, written up press releases and statements about the speeches they're making on stage, and getting those out in the moment. And a lot of those are very tech focused, obviously, but some of them are operations elements. And it's a different kind of content production, I suppose, from what people might be seeing on the lifestyle or B2C end of things. Different kind of challenge.
Yeah, lots of different ways that you can craft content out of events. And generally, I think as a message to anyone watching, there are just so many different ways that you can look at content and repurpose it, splice it into different ways. We are at NewDog, we are just massive advocates of never creating one bit of content, one bit of market research and throwing it out and be done. You can create, a raft of different ways to repurpose that content, make it work, stretch it, make it work as hard as you possibly can, and if needs be, seek some advice as to how to do that. It pains me when I see one bit of content that's taken months and months and months. It's just plonked out on email and that's done. There's just
absolutely completely agree with the integrated approach. And using that multi-channels, using video content, social media, backing it up. We're underpinning it with trade PR as well as the consumer outreach to amplify the message.
Absolutely.
Hugely frustrating to say. I see regularly, we're seeing this with some of these events we're doing, where people obviously put an enormous amount of time to their speeches, and then they don't do anything with them. And what I find bizarre is sometimes then people say, but our PR team said, we can't do a press release about this. We can't do anything. They said, but hold it, you're going to speak to a room of 500 people or industry leaders. In fact, I mean, when I was at Hotel Beds, they used to do these big events, and someone from McKinsey gave a presentation and came down on stage. And I said, "Oh, great! So that's going out now. We're going to send it to journalists." No, you can't do that. Why? Oh, PR team says we can't. So, but we've got 5 journalists in the audience here, and there was 500 people from the sector, and there's people recording it on their mobile phones. I know, but you can't say that to journalists. Okay, fair enough. Doesn't make any sense. Either you should be saying it or you shouldn't. I would have thought that 20 years ago I understand when people did that, but nowadays I don't see how people think you can have a private conversation with 500 people.
Well, exactly. Not when Twitter exists, but that's a whole other story. We are coming to the end of this conversation, which has been thrilling in every way, for me at least. I want to just spend the last 2 minutes, please, talking about consumer loyalty, building consumer loyalty through PR and comms. The brands would have you think that consumer loyalty is all about points. We know better. We know that it's, we're going to talk about how it's built, but PR and comms are integral to developing that loyalty. Molly, what do you think about it?
For me, and I think this sort of touches on a little bit about what Mika said earlier as well. It's about being personable. I think for the content that I put out there, for the properties and the teams I work with, what we're sharing is like, you don't want to see something that you can't relate to, especially after the pandemic. I think it's that's really sort of that's more important than ever. So yeah, just being personable and making sure, like I said earlier, you're tapping into those trends and jumping off the back of anything that people are engaging with, but ultimately just putting the message out there that people can relate to. Because for me, like I just said, I don't want to see something that's not relatable, or that's completely sort of just not within my world. And I appreciate luxury hotels is not for everyone. It's not that accessible, but how can we make it as accessible as possible? And like I said, really touching in on that kind of next generation and just continuing. I guess this is another challenge as well, is like continuing to expand on our kind of existing customer loyalty through the content that we put out there. But yeah, for me a big thing is being personable and being relatable.
Brilliant. Thanks, Molly. Roman, just a very quick answer, if that's okay, given our timing. Tell me about building loyalty, customer loyalty through PR and comms.
Well, it's hugely important, and I think sometimes people think there's something inauthentic about employing PR people, and that great brands should just be genuine, and that people should just be themselves. And I always say, you can't separate what you say from how you say it. And if you want to say it really well, you need to employ professionals. You wouldn't go into a courtroom without a lawyer by your side, or do anything else as a business without some sort of expert advice. And we're there to help people make that happen. You decide what you want to say, but we'll tell you how to say it. What we're here for.
Brilliant. And Mika, lastly, tell me what
like you say, loyalty, it's not just about point scoring, but it's not about point scoring anymore, and gaining points on the cards. You need to give people reasons to be loyal to your brand, and for that you need to be engaging with your messaging, and as Molly says, make the content relatable. And in order to do that, you need to really drill down deep into what your audience who your audiences are, and what your audiences are looking for, and what's going to make them feel excited and inspired by your brand.
That's terrific. Thank you so much, all of you. I think it was a hugely informative and hopefully very creative and also practical conversation. And I hope that the members who are listening to it have found it the same. I think possibly some of the key messages are just ensuring that what you're creating, first of all, that you have that clarity of what your message is and what your purpose is, and then ensuring that it's transmitted in a personal and purposeful way. We are all available on LinkedIn. If anyone has any questions, I'm sorry, I'm speaking for you all, but I'm sure you'd all be very happy if any members want to contact anybody for any advice. And so on behalf of the association and all of its members, thank you so much for taking time to join us for a brilliant conversation, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.